In this scorching heat, he lay, a mighty lion, king of beasts, but now utterly helpless. His name was Mbali, which means flower in Zulu, but this flower was wilting. Days without water or food had taken their toll. His nose was cracked, his eyes dulled, and his strength was fading with every breath. The drought this year was particularly cruel. Rivers had dried up and prey had moved on in search of water. For Mbali, each step was heavier than the last. He was alone, his pride had moved on, and he, weakened, couldn't keep up. The lion who once made the savannah tremble with his roar could now barely lift his head. Mbali was on the brink. In moments like these, nature is unforgiving, only the strongest survive. But fate had something unexpected in store for him. Her name was Amina. She was traveling through Africa, studying its wildlife. Amina wasn't just a tourist, she was a photographer and a conservationist, her heart beating in rhythm with the savannah. She came here to capture the beauty of the wild, but never imagined she'd become part of such a story. Amina spotted Mbali from a distance. At first, she thought he was just resting, but something about his posture alarmed her. She drove closer, cautiously, so as not to startle him. When she saw his cracked nose and labored breathing, her heart sank. Amina knew how dangerous it was to approach a wild animal. A lion is no house cat. Even weakened, he could be deadly. But she couldn't just drive away. Something inside urged her to act. She poured water into an old metal bowl she carried for such moments. Carefully, so as not to provoke Mbali, she placed the bowl a few meters away from him and stepped back. Now all she could do was wait. At first, Mbali eyed the bowl with suspicion. In his world, humans often meant danger, but thirst was stronger than fear. He crawled closer, his movements slow, almost agonizing, and then, finally, he began to drink. Each drop of water brought him back to life. Amina watched, holding her breath. She didn't move, didn't make a sound, afraid to disrupt the moment. After a couple of minutes, Mbali lifted his head. His gaze, once clouded, was now clearer. And then something happened that Amina would never forget. Mbali looked straight into her eyes. There was no threat, no fear in that gaze. There was something human. He slowly approached, his massive paws barely touching the ground, and then he did something extraordinary. Mbali gently brushed his muzzle against her hand, as if thanking her for his salvation. Amina froze. Her heart pounded, not from fear, but from the awe and warmth she felt in that moment. It wasn't just a gesture, it was a bridge between two worlds, the wild and the human. But the story didn't end there. Amina realized that a single drink of water wasn't enough. Mbali was still weak and his chances of surviving alone were slim. She decided to do more. She had food and water in her jeep, but she knew a lion needed more than temporary aid. Amina contacted local rangers via radio who knew the area better than anyone. She explained the situation, describing Mbali and his condition. The rangers promised to come as soon as possible, but warned it would take time. Amina stayed, watching the lion from a distance to avoid disturbing him. She saw him lie down next to the bowl, as if guarding it, sipping more water now and then. His movements were slightly more confident, but he was still far from the mighty beast he once was. While waiting for the rangers, Amina began photographing Mbali. Her camera captured every detail, his cracked nose, his weary eyes that were slowly regaining their spark. Those photos would later become part of her exhibition, but in that moment she wasn't shooting for fame. She wanted to preserve this encounter, this incredible moment of trust. Through her lens, she saw not just a lion, but a soul fighting to survive. Hours later, the rangers arrived. They were astonished to see how calmly Mbali behaved around Amina. Typically, even weakened lions showed aggression or fear, but Mbali was different. The rangers carefully examined him, gave him water mixed with nutrients, and decided he needed to be taken to a reserve where he could recover. They noted his scars from past battles, signs of a life full of challenges in the wild. Transporting a lion is no easy task. Umbali was large, even in his weakened state, and he needed to be sedated for safe transport. Amina watched as the rangers carefully administered the tranquilizer, her heart tight with worry. She didn't want Umbali to feel betrayed after the trust he had shown her, but everything went smoothly. Umbali fell asleep and they loaded him into a special van. Amina followed, unwilling to leave him alone. At the reserve, Umbali was placed in an enclosure where veterinarians monitored him. They confirmed he was severely dehydrated but not in critical condition. With proper care, he could fully recover. Over the next few weeks, Amina visited Umbali often. She couldn't explain why she felt such a bond with this lion, but each time she saw him, she noticed his eyes growing brighter. The vets told her that Umbali was likely a pride leader but had lost his position due to the drought and his weakness. Now, in the reserve, he had a chance to start anew. Amina helped the rangers, bringing food and even joining fundraising efforts for the reserve to support other animals in need. Her dedication inspired the staff, who saw her not just as a visitor but as someone truly committed to the cause. 2 months later, Umbali was ready to return to the wild. Amina was there on the day of his release. She stood at the edge of the savannah watching as Umbali, now strong and full of energy, took his first steps into freedom. He paused, turned, and looked at her, the same knowing gaze. Then he turned and vanished into the tall grass, reclaiming his life as the king of the savannah. Amina knew she'd never see him again, but that moment would stay with her forever. This story isn't just about saving a lion, it's about how a small act of kindness can change a fate. Amina didn't walk away, didn't shy from danger, and wasn't afraid to trust her heart, and Umbali returned that trust. Their encounter is a reminder that even in the harshest of worlds, there's room for compassion. Amina continued her travels, but this story now lived in her heart, one she shared with anyone who would listen. Her photographs of Umbali spread across the world, inspiring people to be kinder, more attentive, and braver. Years later, she would reflect on how that one day reshaped her view of the interconnectedness between humans and animals. And who knows, perhaps somewhere in the savannah, Umbali still remembers the woman who gave him a second chance. Perhaps his roar, echoing at sunset, is his way of saying thank you. Dear friend, thank you for watching this video. If this story touched your heart, don't forget to like and subscribe to the channel to catch more inspiring stories from the wild. Your support helps us share these moments with you. See you in the next video. 5 years ago, in the vast savannah where the sun blazes mercilessly and the wind carries the scents of grass and earth, a meeting took place that changed 2 lives. A woman named Emily, a volunteer at the Xavu Reserve, was wandering through the thickets, searching for traces of poachers. Her work was grueling. Long hours under the scorching sun, constant danger, but Emily's heart belonged to these lands and their inhabitants. She believed every creature deserved a chance at life, and that belief drove her forward despite exhaustion and doubts. That evening, as the sky turned crimson, she noticed an odd shape in the tall grass. Approaching closer, Emily froze. Before her lay a lion, once majestic, now emaciated, barely breathing. His golden fur was matted with dried blood, one paw twisted unnaturally, and broken teeth jutted from his mouth. His eyes, clouded with pain, stared into nothingness. He was alone, abandoned by his pride, left to die. Emily knelt beside him. She knew the odds were slim, but something in his gaze, a faint flicker of life, made her heart clench. She couldn't walk away, couldn't leave him. Her fingers trembled as she radioed for help, but her voice remained steady. Thus began their story. The first days were the hardest. Emily and the team moved the lion, whom she named Saul, after the sun that shone over the savannah, to the reserve's veterinary unit. The vets were pessimistic. Fractures, infections, starvation. "He won't make it," they said, shaking their heads. But Emily didn't listen. She saw in Saul not just an animal, but a being fighting for every breath, and that inspired her. Every morning, she was the first at his side. She carefully cleaned his wounds, changed bandages, and fed him soft meat he could barely chew. She spoke to him as a friend, telling stories of the savannah, the stars, and how he'd run across these plains again. Sometimes it seemed he was listening, his weak eyes catching hers. She read him poems she loved as a child and hummed melodies her mother used to sing. Weeks dragged on slowly. Sol didn't stand, but his breathing grew steadier. His wounds began to heal. Emily slept by his enclosure, afraid to miss the moment he might worsen. Other volunteers, including her friend Jake, encouraged her, but their voices carried doubt. "You're doing all you can, Em, but nature decides," Jake would say, placing a hand on her shoulder. Emily only nodded, but deep down she knew she wouldn't give up. After a month, Sol tried to stand for the first time. His legs shook and he collapsed almost immediately, but it was the first sign of hope. Emily beamed like a child witnessing a miracle. She doubled her efforts: physiotherapy, special diets, long hours by his cage. She sang him old songs she'd heard from her grandmother and stroked his head when he allowed it. Sol, though weak, began to respond, with a slight twitch of his ears, a soft growl as if thanking her. 4 months later, Sol stood on all 4 paws. His movements were clumsy, but he was walking. The vets, who had once written him off, now called it a miracle. Emily knew better. It was their shared victory. She and Sewell had rewritten his fate together. She often sat nearby, watching him test his strength, her heart swelling with pride. The following months were dedicated to recovery. Sol learned to run, to hunt small prey brought to his enclosure. Emily watched as his eyes reignited with life, the spark of a wild beast returning. Yet whenever she approached, he gently lowered his head, letting her touch his mane. A bond grew between them, one no one could explain. Even Jake, a skeptic by nature, admitted, "Em, there's something special between you two." A year later, the time came. Sol was ready to return to the savannah. Emily knew it was right, but her heart was breaking. On the day of his release, she stood by the enclosure's gate, watching as Sol looked back at her. "Go, my boy," she whispered, holding back tears. The lion took a step, then another, and soon his golden form melted into the tall grass. Emily was left alone with an ache in her chest and pride in her heart. Life moved on. Emily returned to her city, Boston, where she worked in an office, raising funds for the reserve. But the savannah never let her go. She often thought of Sewell, his heavy gaze on that first day, his soft growl when he finally stood. She wondered if he was alive, if he'd found a pride, if he roamed the same plains she once did. Sometimes, falling asleep, she saw him in her dreams, strong, free, in the heart of the savannah. 5 years later, Emily received a letter from Xavu. The reserve needed volunteers, and she took a leave without hesitation. Returning there felt like coming home. The savannah greeted her with the same hot wind, the same scent of earth. She wandered familiar trails, recalling every moment with Sol. Jake, now managing part of the reserve, teased, "Looking for your lion, Em?" She only smiled, but deep down she hoped for a miracle. One evening, as the sun painted the sky crimson again, Emily sat at an old observation post. Silence surrounded her, broken only by the rustle of grass and a distant bird's cry. Suddenly, the bushes stirred. Emily froze, her heart pounding. A lion emerged slowly from the thickets. His mane was thicker, his body stronger, but the scars, those she once tended, gave him away. It was Sewell. He stopped a few meters away. His eyes, now clear and strong, locked onto hers. The silence was almost tangible, the air trembling with tension. Emily didn't move, afraid to shatter the moment. She whispered his name, barely audible. "Sol." The lion took a step, then another. Slowly, confidently, he approached and, to her astonishment, laid down at her feet. His massive head brushed her knees and he let out a low, soft growl, the same one she'd heard when she stroked him in the enclosure. Emily, with a trembling hand, touched his mane and tears streamed down her face. He remembered her. After all these years, after the savannah, after freedom, he remembered. She sat there for a long time, feeling the warmth of his body, listening to his breathing. In that moment, there was no fear, no time, just the two of them, a human and a lion, bound by something greater than words could explain. Sol lifted his head, looked at her once more as if saying goodbye, then slowly rose and vanished into the thickets. Emily knew she'd never see him again, but she was at peace. He was alive, he was home. The story spread through the reserve, then the world. People spoke of a miracle, of a bond stronger than nature itself. Emily kept that moment in her heart like a treasure. She returned to Boston, but part of her soul stayed in the savannah with Sol under the crimson sky. Every night, gazing at the stars, she remembered his eyes and the day he came back to tell her, "I didn't forget." Dear friend, thank you for watching this video. If you love this story, don't forget to subscribe to the channel and give it a like. Your support helps us share more incredible stories about nature and the people who protect it. See you soon!